On the welfare side, we are really, like I said, doing a lot right now as it relates to helping owners keep their horses. And we really pride ourselves on that equine welfare project that we're doing. There are almost 1,000 rescues and sanctuaries across the U.S. for horses, and they vary small to large, but the average horse stays in a rescue almost a year. And that's because by the time someone relinquishes a horse, his health may be struggling. So you've got to put some weight back on him and condition him. But they want to train him to go to his next home. So then he has some handling that has to be done before he can be adopted.
Bring them in on the rail at a jog, please. On the rail at a jog.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of On the Rail podcast. This week, exciting guest, something not quite within our industry, but definitely encompasses everything that we do. So without further ado, I'll let Julie introduce herself. If you could just kind of give us your personal background with horses and what you're currently doing.
Sure. I'm Julie Broadway. I'm president at the American Horse Council. We are a bipartisan advocacy organization based in Washington, D.C. that speaks on behalf of the entire equine industry. Regardless of breed or discipline or what your role is in the industry, we're your voice up on Capitol Hill and with all the agencies in Washington. And how I got into the horse industry is sort of a roundabout story. I grew up on a barrier island off the coast of North Carolina. There were not a lot of horses there, but each summer my parents would send my siblings and I to 4-H camp. So one summer I chose a 4-H camp that's focused on horseback riding, and I came back totally smitten with the whole idea. My family had some friends that had some horses, so I got to do a little bit of trail riding, mostly when I was younger. And then I took a break for a number of years, like many of us do when you go off to college and that kind of thing. And then I came back to it. And when I came back to it that time, not only did I decide I wanted to do something in the recreational space, but I wanted to compete. So I showed horses. I had a stallion. I stood at stud, and I had a couple of brood mares. So I did some breeding. I did some pleasure driving. So I did a little bit of everything and really enjoyed it while I had a whole nother professional career. That's how I funded my horse hobby. But then I decided that I wanted to get more involved with the overall association space. So I volunteered for a local horse club. I managed a horse show for a number of years, just got really involved in a number of different ways and served on a lot of different committees and that kind of thing. And I had my undergraduate degree and my MBA. And after about 20 plus years in a large for-profit organization, I was tired of trying to do the for-profit thing and have this horse thing on the side. So I decided I'd put them together. So I went back to Duke University and I got an advanced nonprofit leadership degree and said, okay, let's see if I can go into the nonprofit space. And it just so happened that they had an opening at the American Morgan Horse Association. I had a Morgan horse at the time, and I said, well, what the heck, I'll throw my name in and see where it goes. Well, the next thing I know, they said, hey, are you prepared to move to Vermont and take on this job? And I was like, yeah, that's been great. So I spent almost 10 years in Shelburne, Vermont, right outside of Burlington, with the American Morgan Horse Association. And during that time, I was very involved with the United States Equestrian Federation and the American Horse Council and a number of other equine industries, aspects of the equine industry, and decided, my predecessor was Jay Hickey from the American Horse Council, and he was retiring. And once again, I sort of did the, who knows? Let me throw my name in. And came for an interview, and they said, would you come to Washington, D.C.? And I said, I certainly would, because my entire objective was to give back to the industry because I'm so passionate about horses. And I thought, this is a great way to combine my love and my management skills, my leadership skills to do something to ensure that we have a long, successful, thriving industry. So that's sort of how I got where I am. I came to the American Horse Council in 2016, and I thoroughly love my job. It's one of the most diverse roles I've ever had. And that's because our industry has a lot going on, whether it's legislative or regulatory. So my day can begin with a phone call from a parent who says, I have a special needs child and I need you to point me to an equine assisted services facility. Okay, let me help you with that. And then the next phone call might be from a gentleman who says, they're surveying the road next to my pasture and they're using a drone and they're scaring my horses because they're flying the drone over me. What are the rules about airspace? Okay, call the Federal Aviation Administration. And then the next call might be somebody who says, could you tell me what the rules are for importing and exporting horses? I mean, my day is just totally varied, which is a lot of fun. I like the diversity of it, but it also can be challenging because issues come at us from every possible angle. So you just never know what's going to be on the other end of the phone when it rings.
So I was going to ask what your typical day is like and kind of your routine tasks, but is there ever any kind of routine to it for you?
Having said that, we all have meetings scheduled and we have sort of things we want to accomplish in the day, but sometimes that happens, sometimes not at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Definitely would keep you on your toes.
Yeah. Stuff like the whole drone thing, like who would even think of something like that?
And when I do public speaking a lot, I say to people, I don't think you have a really good vision of the breadth and depth of all the things we do, because we're working on rodenticides. We're working on pyrethrin, which is in your fly spray. We're working on issues that have to do with recreational trail riders and access to trails, and how e-bikes on trails can affect equestrians, and so it runs the gamut.
Wow. That's correct. So what would you say is the most challenging part of your job? And also what would be the most rewarding part of your job?
Okay. So the most challenging part of my job is mobilizing our industry to advocate for our needs. Everybody's got a full plate. I get that. But if we aren't proactive and we don't stay on top of the things that are going on, whether it's at the federal, state, or local level, then we're being reactive and we're fighting a fire. So what we need to do is we need to get people to be more mindful and more attuned to what's going on out there so that they really help us help ourselves. And so that's the biggest challenge, is making sure people are really being smart about how we keep our ear to the ground and stay engaged. And it could be something as simple as meeting with your local zoning board, because suddenly your farm is going to discover that it's going to be reclassified and you need to figure that out. Or understanding what your local zoning board might be thinking about as far as water runoff and other issues that have to do with your property. Lots of things, even at the local level, that people can get involved in. The most rewarding part of my job is I get to work with great people in the industry, people who are passionate about the industry, which is always a great thing. And I really have a really solid team, knock wood. Post-pandemic, lots of people are changing jobs, so I have to keep knocking on wood saying I've got a great team, and they're a lot of fun to work with.
Can you give us an overview of the current state of the horse industry in the United States? I know that's probably a very loaded question that you could talk an entire day on, but
Nope. This is my spiel I do all the time. I am extremely optimistic about where we are as an industry right now. We went into the pandemic really anxious because of our experience through the recession, back in 2007 and about that time frame, where we saw the industry sort of contract and people cut back on their breeding and their spending and those kinds of things. We had the exact opposite effect coming out of COVID. We had people got more engaged in riding. We had waiting lists for lessons. We had high adoption rates from rescues and sanctuaries. Horse prices right now, I hope you guys aren't in the market for a horse, because horse prices are at, I think, a really, really high point right now.
Mm-hmm.
And what I think happened out of the pandemic was people discovered that we are inherently social distancing when we ride. They said, I need that kind of interaction, and that human-animal bond thing kind of kicked in. I think they had more time because they were not traveling. Maybe a lot of migration from urban areas to rural areas, and people had property so they could adopt a horse. And now they're like, oh, wow, hey, look what this is, how it's enriching my life. So we came out of the pandemic, I think, in a really great place. The challenge I think we have now is to keep trying to find ways to leverage that and sort of keep riding that upside that we've been experiencing. So I'm pretty happy with the state of the industry. We have our challenges, no doubt about it, but in the bigger picture, I think we're in a really good place.
Do you foresee there being a shift? So everything was kind of blowing and going post-COVID, for lack of a better word. And then everything's so expensive now with horse prices and feed, it's inflation. And do you foresee that having a downward shift on everything? Or do you think the horse industry will wade through that just fine?
So I'm going to give you a two-part answer to that. I really think we are going to find the answer to that question when we finish our new national economic impact study that we're doing this year, because we're asking a lot of questions like, with inflation, have you changed your buying patterns? Are you buying less or using less? Are you shopping, changing brands, looking for bargains? We're asking a lot of questions about that. So I think we'll have a better sense maybe as we get a little further through the survey. But I do anticipate, personally, there's going to be some softening in some places. There's going to be some folks who said, I really wanted to go to 4 big shows this year. And maybe because of the cost of hay and grain and gas and everything else, maybe I'll only go to 3 instead. There may be a few little shifts like that we see.
But overall, you almost feel like the pandemic benefited the horse industry?
Yeah, it was really a little like, who would have guessed that would have been the case for us? But I really do think that it worked out fairly well for us.
I do have to point out that I find it interesting. So in Ohio, we always have a ton of shows, at least for our stock horses. And since the pandemic, we've had waiting lists of people for stalls. Not only that, but like we open. So for example, shows not happening until June are opening stalls at the end of this month. Months in advance, you have to have your reservations in just to get a stall. And then you still have a waiting list. I just don't think we had that prior to 2019. So to me, it's a little shocking to have these shows sold out for the past 2 years now that we've come back. It's just interesting to see that happen.
Every breed or discipline association I talked to has seen that same phenomena, Liz. They've been like, we have a record number of entries. So even I think, guys, even if it does soften a little bit, I don't think it's going to have this big ripple effect on the industry because it's just so strong right now. It's just fascinating. Now, I am going to give a little shout out and some credit. I think recent events like Yellowstone, like Beyonce's new album cover where she's wearing Western attire and she's got a horse in the background. I think some new music videos that have come out that have featured horses. There's lots of things going on right now that's bringing visibility to us. I'm thankful that we used to say, hey, what happened to all those Westerns that people used to watch? And, older generations would talk about the fact they didn't see horses that much on TV. Now, the National Cutting Horse Association has got a waiting list for people who saw Yellowstone and said, I want to try that.
Mm-hmm. I hope we can capitalize on it, as an industry and carry it forward for sure. Because, I didn't really think about that, but you're right. There's so much more visibility to it than there has been. Visibility and pop culture type thing. So, all righty. Well, what economic contributions does the horse industry make to the U.S. economy, and how do those contributions compare to other industries?
So the last time we did a national economic study was in 2017. We found that our industry was contributing $122 billion in value added to the U.S. economy, which is a great number. That was up from the previous study that we had done. We have about 1.74 million in total employment impact, which is great. That's not a number to sneeze at all. So we're really pleased with that. And our horse population was at 7.2 million horses. The number that I love the most out of this study was we found that 30.5% of all U.S. households contain a horse enthusiast. And that's a new statistic we've never had before. Now, they might not own a horse. They might only spectate or they might participate in some way. But to see, and that 30.5 translates into 38 million households across the U.S. that have a horse enthusiast. So that tells me that we still have a lot of market opportunity out there that we can go after. We keep talking about wanting to grow the industry more, and I'm really excited about some of the things that happened during the pandemic, like the diversity, equality, and inclusion movement, really has opened some new avenues. I'm talking about Cowgirls of Color or Compton Cowboys or Detroit Horsepower, or Philadelphia has a program called Work to Ride. And all of those are programs that are focusing on underrepresented communities and bringing a whole new audience sort of to our entire space. So I'm really excited about some of those kinds of things that are going on.
I think if those surveys could include inputs from like young girls, 10, 12-year-old girls, the percentage of horse enthusiasts in a household would probably be higher. Because it's like most of us, I feel like, go through that phase at some point. Some of us just don't get out of it.
So on that note, with that many horse enthusiasts, do you have like a input or suggestion on like how these organizations can include these youth kids, or what is your take on that? Do you feel like our youth participation is down at all?
No, what I'm actually hearing is youth participation is up. And about 2 years ago, we formed a task force called the Youth Engagement Task Force. And the whole purpose of that task force is to bring together all the breed and discipline groups that have different youth programs to collaborate and share what we're all doing. Let's not reinvent the wheel. Okay, what's being really successful at AQHA? What's going on at the Paint Horse Association? How's this playing out with polo? And what are the things that we can do to learn from each other? How can we help each other really capture that youth segment? You guys know this. What ends up happening a lot is kids get in, they're very engaged until they sort of reach a certain age where they get distracted by all these other sports or dating or whatever it happens to be, or they go off to college. There's just too much going on. And it's not until they get maybe a little bit in their later 20s or 30s where they've got a job, they have some income, and then they circle back around. And what we've been seeing a lot of organizations do is form what we call young adult alliances, where they're trying to kind of hang on to them through those little lean years and kind of keep them there. Lots and lots of possibilities out there I think for us as far as youth is concerned. The task force just finished a ag educator survey. We surveyed all ag educators and asked a series of questions about what their students know about our industry and what would be resources that would be useful to them. So that's our next little action item for that task force. Is the educators told us we need more hands-on material about the equine industry. They really like that practical, stuff that engages students. So we're working on some new curriculums for that.
What are some of the other major challenges facing the horse industry in the United States?
Oh, well, I would say two things, and I don't want them to sound like a negative, but they are things we have to contend with. One is environmental activists who have concerns about, sort of our carbon footprint or about wastewater and all those kinds of things. We've had a little bit of movement in California where we've had a couple of environmental groups that have gone after a few horse farms, and that's been a little bit challenging for them. I would also say, in the same vein, we have to be mindful of public perception. Social license to operate is a subject I talk about a lot, how the public perceives us. And that gets us to sort of what I call the animal welfare activists, who are constantly sort of looking at things that are going on in our space and sort of trying to influence some of the practices we have and some of the things we do. That's not always bad. Sometimes there are things we need to improve upon, but sometimes they are a little overly aggressive with some of the things that they're just not as familiar with some of our practices. And so they see them and they think there's something really not right about it. And it just takes a little more education and a little more work. So those are some of the challenges I think we've got right now.
Do you feel the popularity of Yellowstone has increased visibility to the activists then as well?
That's a great question. I don't know. Maybe.
Mm-hmm. I didn't know if you've noticed an uptick of their attention on the horse industry from it. So just a random question that popped into my head. All right. How has the horse industry evolved in recent years, and what trends do you see shaping its future as we go forward?
Oh, gosh. Now, that's a great question. So trends, I would say, you guys can confirm this or not, our industry has been a little reluctant to accept technology and change.
Mm-hmm.
We've got our tried and true methods. And so we're like, I don't know about this. But I think over the last few years, I've seen some really great technology advances kind of start to be integrated into our space. I'm thinking about smart halters that are being used, other devices that have come into play for measuring, even if it's somebody on a trail, pinpointing that with a GPS so they don't get lost, or keeping up with how many miles they've gone, those kinds of things. So some new strategies there. We've seen it, especially in the veterinary space, some more advanced technologies. There's a lot of people that call our office wanting to ask us questions about the market because they have a product they would like to introduce into the industry, and they're trying to understand what's the return on investment, what's the market penetration like, which is really encouraging to me that we've got people who want to invest in the space. I spent some time about a week or so ago talking to a professor at Colorado State University. He and I were laughing about some of the things that I think we're going to see over time because of drought and other things, and the hay production is at one of its lowest rates in the last 10 or 12 years. So I think you're going to see products like Farm Box, which is a company that is taking shipping containers and creating hydroponic growing systems inside. So Jenna calls up and says, please deliver a box to my farm. They come, they hook it to your utilities, and you grow alfalfa, and you cut it off, and alfalfa, keeps growing, and it comes back again and again. And I think we're going to see solutions like that are going to come into play that help us deal with some of the other challenges that we're sort of facing. So I'm excited about that kind of stuff.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Do you hear, I guess, from some of these, I guess, for lack of a better word, like tech companies that are interested in doing something in the horse industry space? Because tech's so major everywhere right now, but I would love to see this stuff.
Not only do we hear from the tech companies, but we hear from venture capitalists, because they're trying to make a decision about whether to invest in some of those tech solutions that are out there. There are people constantly, even people from Europe or Australia or other countries, that are contacting us because they've come up with a product that they want to market in the US, and their market operates differently from ours. And my example that I always give everybody is a candy manufacturer in Australia who makes licorice, and he found out horses like licorice. And so he thought, well, maybe I'll create an entire equine line of candy, licorice, and bring it to market in the US. And he came and called on us and asked us a whole lot of questions to try to figure out how would I go about getting into the US market with this product. And I'm like, well, that's really, that really is exciting to think that there are people from other countries who want to come into the US with those kinds of products.
So on that note, do you see much different in the US horse industry versus the rest of the world? I know, across the world, horses are viewed in very different.
Very, very, very different.
But Europe or more modernized places of the world, is our industry much different than those places, in your opinion?
I think so. And of course, I think also because in certain segments, it's my perception, that's all it is they have fewer disciplines. Like if you go to Europe, you don't have as many disciplines as we do here. So the way that they approach the market is very different. The way that the market's governed over there is very different. Lots of nuances in other countries.
How does the American Horse Council work with other organizations and stakeholders in the horse industry to promote its interests and address its challenges?
Oh, that's a loaded question. Let me just put it this way. You don't get anything done in Washington, D.C. unless you have great partners. And they don't have to just be equine industry partners. They can be ag industry partners. So we work really closely with a lot of different coalitions. I'll give you a couple examples just to get you thinking about it. So we use a lot of foreign workers in our space, whether they're on the backstretch or grooms or whatever. So we need H-2B visas. We need to get those workers in. Well, so does landscaping, so does hospitality, even ag, general ag, if they want to pick apples or whatever it is. We are very much engaged with the H-2B coalition, which is made up of all kinds of different industries who all have a need for these foreign workers. And we're trying to figure out how do we move that conversation forward? How do we get what we need to keep our businesses going? And then it can range over to, I'm really intrigued with the outdoor recreation coalition. So this is hiking, boating, camping, fishing, archery, any kind of outdoor activity. Recreational trail riding falls in that category. And all of us are interested in how we get more green space, how we have better trails, how we have better amenities in parks for all users. So that's kind of an interesting group to work with. And it can just range all over the board. Professional sports, we're part of the sports coalition, which is Major League Baseball, basketball, football. Well, equestrian sports, racing, So all of those different coalitions and partners are so important to help us figure out how to navigate and make progress on some of the issues that we're facing.
How do you personally keep up with all of this? I mean, it's so wide reaching to so many different things. I can't imagine.
Yeah, it is very eye-opening when you get started on it. I'm very fortunate. I have Bridget Shea is my government affairs liaison. She does all of my work up on the Hill. Emily Stearns is my health, welfare, and regulatory affairs. That means she does all the agency work. So if it's Department of Interior or U.S. Department of Ag or Department of Transportation or Federal Aviation Administration, any of those agencies, she does all of that. I have Ashley Harkins is my director of the United Horse Coalition, which is a program we initiated many years ago to try to help horses in need or horse owners who find themselves in circumstances where they feel like they can no longer care for their horse. And we provide an entire database so that they can go and find hay banks and feed coupons and all these other things. Because our goal is to try to help an owner keep their horse if they can, so they don't get into the rescue pipeline. And I've got a researcher on staff right now working on our equine welfare research project, which is surveying all the rescues and sanctuaries across the country to understand how many horses they have, how many spaces they have available, how long a horse stays in a rescue on average, all the nuts and bolts to try to figure out where are our gaps as an industry to help with the aftercare of horses. I'm trying to go through that. So I don't want to take full credit. There's a lot to cover, but I'm lucky. Like I said, I've got a good team and we really enjoy what we do. And everybody, we sort of have to dig in together in order to make it happen.
Well, on the horse or animal welfare, that kind of brings up my next question is how does the American Horse Council address issues related to animal welfare and horse health, and what other initiatives or what initiatives are currently underway in this area?
Oh, well, there's so many with this one. So we work really closely with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, especially as it relates to herd health. That's what I call it. We want to mitigate disease. And so we are very involved with the Equine Disease Communication Center, which tracks disease outbreaks. We implemented a universal equine microchip lookup tool a couple of years ago because microchips are becoming more popular. But what we found was if an animal control officer came upon a horse and he scanned that chip, he had to go to multiple places to find where that chip was registered. So now all the chip manufacturers work with us, and we have one place you can go and look up, and it'll come back and tell you who that horse, not only who his manufacturer of his chip was, but which breed or discipline association has that horse on file. So if Liz's horse gets out and somebody comes upon it and they scan it, they'll come back and they'll say, oh, look, Liz got a quarter horse. It's registered with AQHA. Oh, and she also competed it with the national reining horse. And so you get some background information about that horse to help you figure out how to navigate and get where you need to go. So those are two good examples. On the welfare side, we are really, like I said, doing a lot right now as it relates to helping owners keep their horses. And we really pride ourselves on that equine welfare project that we're doing. There are almost 1,000 rescues and sanctuaries across the U.S. for horses, and they vary small to large, but the average horse stays in a rescue almost a year. And that's because by the time someone relinquishes a horse, his health may be struggling. So you've got to put some weight back on him and condition him. But they want to train him to go to his next home. So then he has some handling that has to be done before he can be adopted. So it's a long process. Dogs and cats go into shelters and they're only there usually 60, 90 days. Horses are there much, much longer. And because of that financial investment that we have to make to improve their health, it's just a long process to kind of cope with.
How does the horse industry, we as the horse industry participants, or you guys as the American Horse Council, work with federal, state, and local governments to promote our interests and secure funding for horse-related programs? And maybe what more could we be doing for ourselves on the local level?
Yeah. So the American Horse Council does mostly federal. So we sort of keep our ear to the ground. At any given time, we're monitoring over 100 pieces of legislation that may have some effect on us. Right now, I think I've got about 20 or 30 that are really specific where we're working on hard. Others, we just look around and say, okay, let's keep an eye on that one. But if it's not picking up any traction, we won't spend a lot of time and resources on it. So we do all the federal stuff. We have state horse councils across the country, and they do most of the state work. But I will honestly say that sometimes there's one thing going on in a state, and if it's successful in that state, it's most likely going to be picked up by another state. So we do kind of keep our pulse on what's going on in certain states to see if they're going to be replicated and what we need to do about that. A great example of that is in California. There was a real movement to ban rodeos, and we had to really pull together a lot of resources and a lot of different stakeholders to try to go in, educate them, and explain to them why we needed them to rethink that strategy. Right now, there's a piece of legislation going through, also again in California, that is talking about asking recreational trail riders to pick up horse poop when they ride the trails. So I was saying, you're riding along, your horse poops, you have to dismount, pick up the poop, dispose of the poop, remount, and then keep riding. Or you'd have to wear a tail bag. That would be your two choices. Neither of those are really popular or really, don't think anything we would like to see. So again, it's about trying to sort of stay in front of those issues before we have to start doing playing the defense. Let's be on the offense on those. So that's what's happening sort of from the federal, state, and then the local level. We're really lucky that so many of the AHC members are all across the country keep us up to date on some of the local things, especially as it relates to zoning and that kind of stuff. They'll call us up and they'll say, have you heard about this? And we'll do a little research, and then we'll talk to the State Horse Council or some other resources and say, okay, let's figure out what our strategy is on this.
Is there anything at the federal level that we should be aware of, both positive or negative?
Oh, at the federal level. Hang on. Let me find my laundry list here, because there's a lot.
There's a lot. Sorry to open that can of worms on you.
I'll give you a couple of things to be thinking about. So we are really focusing right now. This year is a year for the Farm Bill. This happens about every 5 years. Everybody in Washington in the 118th Congress wants a piece of the Farm Bill. So we're all in there kind of nudging and elbowing to try to see if we can get our line item in there. So we've been working a little bit on some issues that go into the Farm Bill, like a National Agricultural Statistic Equine Census. Just a quick side note. So the National Agricultural Statistics Service is a part of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. They conduct a livestock census every few years. They have a very specific definition of horses that they include in their census. And that has to do with horses being on working production farms. So they say there are 2.5 million horses in the U.S. And we say there are 7.2 million horses. And trying to explain that discrepancy and to get funding based upon our number, not their number, is why we need an equine census. So that's our big ask for the Farm Bill this year. But we're also working on a couple of different pieces of tax legislation. Andy Barr from Kentucky wants to introduce the horse depreciation bill again this year. Normally that has to be approved every year, and he's putting one through this year that he hopes would make depreciation of horses permanent. So we're very involved with that. We are always keeping our eye on a couple of different things that have to do with equine assisted services. We get funding through the federal government that is given to the Veterans Administration to provide for veterans to take equine assisted services. And we want to always keep that moving. So lots of little things. And all of those are things that would be to our benefit if we could get them to happen. Now, there are always things that we're always also sort of keeping an eye on because we think they may have some unintended consequences. And so I'll give you my example for today. It could be nothing, but we don't know yet. So there's a new bill that's been introduced called Veterans for Mustangs. And we think, wow, that sounds great on the surface. But when you read what was originally proposed, they were going to create a workforce plan for veterans to train to use rifles to tranquilize Mustangs to control herd population. And this creates some concerns because we're like, do we really need veterans to be shooting dart guns at Mustangs? That sounds a little, So it's not one we're overly concerned, but it is one we're going into that office where that came from and saying, we think we need some more details before we quite understand what you're trying to accomplish with this particular thing. But on the regulatory side, like I mentioned earlier, we're keeping our eye on rodenticides. They are rewriting the rules. The EPA is about rodenticides, and that's got some people concerned. We have provided the EPA with lots and lots of data about the use of pyrethrin. We all have fly spray. We don't know what we do without it. We've been using it for 50 or plus years. But the EPA was a little concerned because they didn't have enough scientific data to prove that there was no negative effects from the use of pyrethrin on bystanders. So we've been working with them on that. There's a conversation right now about hemp byproducts in feed from the FDA. So we're keeping our eye on that. We don't know that we've got enough scientific data to say whether or not hemp byproducts in feed for livestock is a good thing or not. So those are just 6 or 8 examples.
Right. Yeah, I'm like, my wheels are processing, but touching on the horse appreciation thing, is that really geared towards the racehorse industry primarily?
Yeah, it is. It is.
Okay, that's what I thought. All righty. Well, what advice would you give to young people who are interested in pursuing careers in the horse industry, and what skills or knowledge do you think are essential for success?
So I speak to university equine science programs across the country all the time. The first thing I always tell them is there are more jobs than just being a horse trainer or veterinarian. There are tons of different opportunities to combine your passion for horses with whatever your other skills might be. You can go into marketing, you can go into show attire, you could become a videographer. I mean, there's just tons and tons of jobs where you can take some aspect of a skill that you really enjoy and put it to work in the horse industry. I tell all the students that they should really pursue internship opportunities, because there are lots of internship opportunities where they can go out there and sort of test the waters and experiment to figure out, what might be a good thing. I generally have anywhere from 4 to 6 interns, and they all work remotely. They're assigned a project for us, and it gives them a chance to say, is this something that sounds interesting or not, kind of thing. Lots of different avenues for young people to explore in the career space. But I don't want to downplay that we need more veterinarians. I mean, we've heard clearly from the American Veterinary Medical Association and the American Association of Equine Practitioners that we're seeing a decline in people who go through veterinary school, start their career, and then in 5 years they exit. Large animal vets may often go from large animals to small animals because they think that sounds like a little better work-life balance. And then some of them just get out, period. And in rural areas, we were already struggling with veterinary shortages, and the fact that we're now seeing more of a decline. So I'm really excited about some new programs going on, like at Lincoln Memorial or Texas Tech, where they're looking at ways to streamline the entire veterinary school experience, help students get out with less student debt. So then it's not quite so hard for them to be able to stay in this practice.
That's definitely something to be aware of. I can't imagine going all the way through vet school and then completely getting out, but I actually do know somebody that did that. So
it's very draining though, being a veterinarian. There's just so many heartbreaks, I feel like, in your day to day.
I tell everybody, so they get out, they have a lot of student debt. They go to work. They can't at that point afford a sole practice. So they go to work in a big practice where they work a lot of hours, they're on call a lot. It's just a real struggle those first few years that they're out of school. And I think they just get so discouraged that it's really hard for them to say, can I persevere? How long is it going to take me before I can afford to feed myself and house myself?
Well, tell us why someone should become a member of the American Horse Council. And if somebody was interested in getting more involved, what could they do?
Okay, so we really, really encourage people to be members because you are in the loop of what's going on. You get our newsletter, you get our materials. You will often get something from us that tells you a piece of legislation that we need you to pick up the phone or write a letter to your congressman to tell him what your perspective is. Congressional members want to hear from their constituents. It's great when I go up and talk to them, but they would rather hear from Liz because Liz lives in the state or the district that they represent. We really want to encourage people to become members. But if you don't want to become a member, I understand. We have one other avenue for you, which doesn't cost a dime, and that's sign up for our Congressional Cavalry. And the Congressional Cavalry is a resource we have that all we do is activate it when there's a piece of legislation that we want people to contact their congressman on. So you're not going to get our newsletter. You're not going to get bombarded with anything from us. If you sign up for the Cavalry, you're just going to get a call to action when we need you. So there's a couple of different avenues, but membership really gives you the most for your money because you're going to get all the other things that come along with it.
be a good way to kind of stay on top of current events, going on in the horse industry. It's hard to get out of our own bubble sometimes to know. Yeah. And I know you guys are getting ready or have started the 2023 economic impact study. So tell us a little bit about that, what it's going to do, and how we can maybe assist you guys.
Yep. We have been working really hard to refine the survey that we conduct. The survey will start in April of 2023. It'll run for 6 months through September. So plenty of time, regardless of whether you are busy showing or whatever your life is like, plenty of time for you to take the survey. It takes about 25 minutes to take the full survey. Then we'll produce the final report in the fall, probably in, my guess is late October, early November. This time around, we're asking some of the questions we always ask, which gets at population and expenses, so we can figure out what we contribute to the U.S. economy, those kinds of things. But as I mentioned earlier, this time we're also asking some new questions that have to do with the market and changes in the marketplace. We're very interested in interviewing and collecting data from universities to see how many students they have in the equine science programs. We're trying to see what that pipeline looks at. We're asking some questions this time also about employment. So we're saying, if you own a farm, how many people did you employ last year, full-time and part-time? How many did you need? So we're trying to figure out what's the gap, because we hear all the time that people can't get enough workers. So we want to know, if you needed 10 and you could only get 6, so you're short 4 people, what's the impact of that on the space? So we've got a whole laundry list of new questions this time around that we're trying to get at some of those other kinds of data points that we need to know.
How would somebody get this survey?
So survey's going to come to you in a couple of different ways. Your breed or discipline association that you're a member of. So if you're a member, for example, of AQHA, they're going to send it to you. It'll be out on social media and people can share it, that kind of thing. There'll be some press releases and some other PR around the whole thing. So we think we've got lots of avenues to get it to people. This time we're offering incentives to complete the survey. So you will be eligible for prizes. If you go all the way through the survey and get to the end, you're entered into a drawing. You could win a John Deere Gator. You could win a year of feed for one horse, either Cargill or Purina. You could win some gift certificates. You could win some educational content from a couple of universities who are donating things. So we're really trying hard this time to say, I know this is taking 25 minutes of your time and we're asking you some tough questions, but let us help you by giving you some prizes to reward you for doing that.
That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. And if I'm not mistaken, I think on your website, you can also kind of donate to the cause for this. Is that correct? You're seeking donations?
The American Horse Council is not a government agency. We are completely funded by members and sponsors and those kinds of things. So that means when we do this study that we have to go out to the industry and get help to pay for it. So you can go on our website if you'd like to help us pay for the study. We're going to do, the national study is $350,000 to do. We're pretty close to our goal, but we're still a little short. We also commission specialty reports. So this time we're going to have a special report for Texas, Florida, California, Maryland, and New York. And then we have a couple of small local studies that have been commissioned, which is a little new. Hadn't really done much of that in the past. So Marion County, Florida, wanted their own study because that's a big horse population there. And Long Island, New York wanted their own study. So some interesting things there. And then the standardbred industry wanted an entire standardbred report. Just tell us what the economic impact is of the standardbred industry. So we're doing a little specialty report for them.
And in terms of your website, I know there's tons of great educational materials freely available to a lot of people there too. Do you want to touch on what's available if people haven't ever visited the American Horse Council website?
Yeah, so go to www.horsecouncil.org. You will find legislative updates, regulatory updates, industry initiatives that we support or sponsor. You can go under the resource tab. You'll find all kinds of materials and content, publications that we sell, webinars that we host. We host a webinar usually every couple of months, and we record them and put those back out there. We just did one on hay and hay shortages, so it's a fascinating one to look at. We're going to do one coming up in April on, believe it or not, sports betting and fantasy gaming, because we're seeing that come across other disciplines now. So it's not just in the racing sector anymore. Now, hunter jumpers and other groups are getting into the whole idea of this. So we're going to be having a conversation about what's that all about and how's that going to affect us and that kind of thing. So lots of content like that that's out there under the resource tab. And then you can also go from our site over to the United Horse Coalition's website and some of our other partners and other programs that we have and learn more about what they have to offer too.
Interesting.
All righty. Well, I kind of have all my questions asked. Liz, do you have anything?
I'm good. Julie, you were very knowledgeable. Appreciate all of the insight that you've given us today. I'm good with questions for now.
Okay. Well, if anyone wants to reach out to me, I'm easy to find. I'm Julie Broadway at horsecouncil.org. Just drop me an email and I'll get back to you. Or you can write to our general line, which is info@horsecouncil.org, and we'll get back to you. I really appreciate you guys inviting me and taking time. And if something piques your curiosity, or maybe even in the fall, if you want to hear about the results from the economic impact study.
Yes, let's do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. What we heard and what we learned.
Yes, we'll absolutely do that because I would love to know, get to get your input on all of that. But we really appreciate your time today. And I always really appreciate people when I reach out to them and I just get a response, especially from somebody in your position that I know you have 1,000 things going on at once. So your time and responsiveness is very valued and appreciated. And
well, as I said at the beginning, I think one of the challenges we have as an industry is to mobilize people, to engage them and get them out there and advocating for the industry. So I always try to make time to do any of these kind of podcast things or any kind of speaking engagements, because I feel like I'm kind of like the evangelist for the, on the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, I think we're in good shape with you at the helm of things. You have a very infectious, enthusiastic personality, and that probably is what it takes. So we appreciate you for in that role too.
Oh, well, thanks. Have a great day. I hope you have a wonderful spring and summer. The sun is finally out here in today.
We're all ready for it. Yeah.
Yes,
Thank
we
you.
are.
You too.
Bye.
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 All right, that'll be your class. Bring them in and line them up.